Welcome back to my podcast on God's ancient wisdom for our modern world. I'm your host, James Chapman. I look forward to this because today we're going to look into Proverbs chapter 8 today. Here we see one of the most definitive descriptions of wisdom that we find in Proverbs. We will read about just how accessible wisdom is, what wisdom is like, some of the benefits of following wisdom, how long wisdom has been around, and the potential consequences of rejecting or ignoring wisdom. So, I will call this episode all about wisdom. So, let's jump in and look what God has to say about wisdom in Proverbs chapter 8. Let's read verses 1 through 4, where it says, "Does not wisdom call out? Does not understanding raise her voice? At the highest point along the way, where the paths meet, she takes her stand. Beside the gate, leading into the city, at the entrance, she cries aloud. To you, O people, I call out. I raise my voice to all mankind." Verses 1 through 4 describe the availability of wisdom. Now, where does it say that wisdom makes itself known? Well, at the highest point along the way, where the paths meet, and beside the gate leading into the city, at the very entrance. And what does she do there? Well, she takes her stand and she cries aloud. In the culture at the time, what does those places and what do those acts represent? Well, the places are very interesting. See, the high points and path junctions, that indicates places where you're going to find maximum exposure and availability. These places are not hidden. They're not restricted to just a few privileged individuals. It's whoever's there. You see, wisdom has deliberately made the effort to be accessed by the wise and the foolish, the important and the humble, the rich and the poor. Now, at the city gates, now this is where much of the city business was conducted. For example, in the book of Ruth, we see how Boaz went there to purchase the property which belonged to a gentleman named Ahimelech. That was Naomi's deceased husband and Ruth's father-in-law. And same place where he decided to take Ruth as his wife. See, at the city gates was where legal affairs were ratified and the leaders of the city would gather. So, wisdom should be found in places like that, places where truth is important, and those who should recognize it tend to gather for important work. What does she do? Well, she takes a stand and she cries aloud. Now, taking a stand means that wisdom is making its declaration about what it sees is true and what is false, what is good and what is evil, what is beneficial and what is harmful. Wisdom is defining itself and laying the foundation for what it values, what it holds in high regard, and what it despises. And crying aloud shows that wisdom is not shy, it's not introverted when it comes to expressing what it believes. What does this indicate about the access we have to God's wisdom? Verse 4 is very clear. To you, O people, I call out. I raise my voice to all mankind. You see, wisdom, like God himself, makes itself available to any and all who seek it. It is not quiet. It is not hesitant. It's not shy. In his wisdom, he has made his wisdom accessible to all who seek it in sincerity. Let's continue and examine what wisdom has to say about itself. In the following verses, we see wisdom personified. She speaks to us and describes some of her qualities and values. Let's read verses 5 through 11. You who are simple, gain prudence. You who are foolish, set your hearts on it. Listen, for I have trustworthy things to say. I open my lips to speak what is right. My mouth speaks what is true. For my lips detest wickedness. All the words of my mouth are just. None of them is crooked or perverse. To the discerning, all of them are right. They are upright to those who have found knowledge. Choose my instruction instead of silver, knowledge rather than choice gold. Wisdom is more precious than rubies, and nothing you desire can compare with her. Yes, verses 5 through 11 describe some of the attributes of wisdom. Now, how is wisdom defined in this passage? Well, first of all, it's described as being trustworthy. That means it's dependable, it's reliable, it's responsible. It says that it's true, which means it is based on facts, not opinions, not feelings. It's factual, it's accurate, it's correct, and it's verifiable. It also goes on to say that it actually detests wickedness. So wisdom stands in opposition to those things which are harmful. And it says that it's just. In other words, it doesn't just stand in opposition to something, it stands with those things which are good and right. It also says that it is not crooked or perverse. It's not deceitful, twisted, devious, or designed to confuse. Finally, it says it's right and upright. Wisdom promotes wholesome living and benefits both the individual and society in general. What else have we seen described in this manner in Scripture? Well, I would like to propose God Himself. This should remind us that He really is the only ultimate source of all true knowledge and wisdom. And any man or woman who claims to be wise must be measured by the characteristics we just defined. Is what they say trustworthy and true? Is it just? Does it detest wickedness? Are their words both right and upright? Are they or their words crooked or perverse? If they don't measure up, they are not wise. If they do measure up, they are wise, and the source of this wisdom comes from God, not from this world. Let's look at some more aspects of wisdom. Let's look at verses 12 through 21, where we read, I, wisdom, dwell together with prudence. I possess knowledge and discretion. To fear the Lord is to hate evil. Well, I hate pride and arrogance, evil behavior and perverse speech. Counsel and sound judgment are mine. I have insight. I have power. By me, kings reign, and rulers issue decrees that are just. By me, princes govern, and nobles, all who rule on earth. I love those who love me, and those who seek me find me. With me are riches and honor, enduring wealth and prosperity. My fruit is better than fine gold. What I yield surpasses choice silver. I walk in the way of righteousness along the paths of justice, bestowing a rich inheritance on those who love me and making their treasuries full. Yes, this passage continues to add attributes to this personification of wisdom. So what are these new traits that are described here, which are being associated with wisdom? Well, three things are listed immediately here: prudence, knowledge, and discretion. Now, these are interesting traits to be linked to wisdom. First, prudence. It refers to being aware and showing a concern for consequences. It looks to the future. It cares about the effects that decisions you have, that you make today, and how they affect what's going to happen in your future. And knowledge, well, that's a key element in grasping these probabilities of the outcomes caused by the decisions made by the individual. And discretion, this is where the knowledge and prudence used with wisdom meet reality. You see, discretion is defined as the quality of behaving or speaking in such a way as to avoid causing offense or revealing private information. So, wisdom, it does not operate independently from an understanding of truth and reality. It recognizes the fact that actions have consequences. It acknowledges that the way to prevent chaos and calamity is to behave in a manner which minimizes the chances of violating the realities of this world, which have been proven to cause problems. Wisdom guides us through life using traits like prudence, knowledge, and discretion, which are unchanged by time and technology. So, it is still the best way to live our lives, even in this modern world. So once again, we see how true wisdom stands in opposition to concepts which are dangerous and harmful. It says that wisdom hates pride, arrogance, evil behavior, and perverse speech. All these things wisdom calls evil, and wisdom justifies this decision by reminding us that these things are all a part of following God. You see, true wisdom can and must be directly tied to God, because only in Him will you ever find a solid, unchanging base of truth which never shifts or is modified by our flawed human nature. We also read in verses 14 through 16 that following the ways of wisdom, that is, prudence, knowledge, and discretion, will lead us to sound judgment, insight, and power. We will, like the rulers of old, make decisions which are right and just. Again, these are traits and concepts which are the same since the beginning of time. It leads us to a lifestyle which is designed by God and His universe which He designed to maximize the potential for good and minimize the possibilities of failure and harm. We read further and see that wisdom loves those who follow her and allows and enables those who look for her to find her. Wisdom reminds us that following her ways provides the best possibilities to acquire riches, honors, enduring wealth, prosperity, a rich inheritance, and full treasuries. But these principles are qualified, they're limited by verse 19, where we are reminded that the end game, the actual ultimate benefits of living a life of wisdom are actually better than fine gold and choice silver. Now, the results of living God's way may include physical wealth, but the eternal benefits far outweigh the temporary benefits of riches. I need to remind us as we read these verses that the Proverbs are principles, not promises. These and other verses have been ripped out of context by some misguided or deceitful people. People who teach that these verses can actually be used as a tool or a club to force God's hand in order to make you rich. But other equally valid scriptures remind us that God is sovereign, not us. God directs our life. We don't direct His. God is the potter, not us. We are the clay. It is important that we remember that when we read passages like this. Now, let's move on and take a look at wisdom's birthday and childhood. Of course, I'm being a little silly, but why don't we look at what Proverbs has to say here? Verses 22 through 26 read as follows. The Lord brought me forth as the first of his works, before his deeds of old. I was formed long ages ago, at the very beginning, when the world came to be. When there were no watery depths, I was given birth. When there were no springs overflowing with water. Before the mountains were settled in place, before the hills, I was given birth. Before he made the world or its fields or any of the dust of the earth. What a beautiful description of how God used his wisdom in the creation process when he formed our world. But we are not finished. Let's look at verses 27 through 31, where we see, I, that's wisdom, was there when he set the heavens in place, when he marked out the horizon on the face of the deep, when he established the clouds above and fixed securely the fountains of the deep, when he gave the sea its boundary, so the waters would not overstep his command, and when he marked out the foundations of the earth. Then I was constantly at his side. I was filled with delight day after day, rejoicing always in his presence, rejoicing in his whole world and delighting in mankind. Wow. What a beautiful picture of God's creation and wisdom's part in it. Now, what can we glean from wisdom being brought forth before God's deeds of old? First, the universe was created on purpose and with a purpose. It was not the result of some random Big Bang. The Big Bang, if it actually occurred, was the result of an order from God, something that was created from nothing, possibly from a command to let there be light. Honest astronomers, cosmologists, physicists, and biologists, they will admit that the laws which govern our universe, the interconnectivity of celestial bodies which we can measure, and the extreme complexity of all living things, could only be the result of a deliberate creative process. And this creative process would demand a creative being so far beyond our understanding as to be incomprehensible. Second, is that all this creative effort would appear to be for the primary purpose of allowing and sustaining life on our planet. And here's what we know. The amount of gravity we have is just enough to sustain and contain our atmosphere without crushing our bodies and other forms of life. The atmosphere we have is mixed in just the right amounts to sustain life. Now, the water cycle of water vapor, clouds, and rain effectively distributes the key compound of our planet, being water, in vast quantities across the planet, but with no moving parts to wear out or break down. Wow. Now, the electromagnetic field around our world protects us from the solar radiation created by the sun. And speaking of the sun, our distance from it is just the right distance to give us the warmth and light we need without burning us alive or freezing us to death. Now, I could go on for a long time, but I think I have made my point. The earth and the whole universe were made by God to provide a place where we could dwell. It was created so we could have a place where we could interact with the one who made it all and learn of him. Ultimately, love him. And now to finish this chapter, let's read verses 32 through 36, where we see, "Now then, my children, listen to me. Blessed are those who keep my ways. Listen to my instruction and be wise. Do not disregard it. Blessed are those who listen to me, watching it daily at my doors, waiting at my doorway. For those who find me find life and receive favor from the Lord. But those who fail to find me harm themselves. All who hate me love death." These verses compare and contrast wisdom with death and life. Now, is the writer simply being poetic or exaggerating to make a point? When you consider the consequences of following or rejecting a life marked with wise choices, it would seem reasonable to conclude that the writer was being neither poetic or exaggerating. You see, the differing results of wise and foolish decisions are so severe that likening them to life and death is not hyperbole. It's not exaggeration. So, spending your life looking for wisdom, that is, watching at my doors, waiting at my doorway, is the best, most reasonable course of action for anyone who wishes to simply live as conflict-free life as possible. And then, for a Christ follower, it is the only life that will please the God who gave his life to make your eternal life with him possible. So how can we wrap up this chapter? What can we draw from a podcast which is all about wisdom? Well, let me ask 4 questions. Do you want to live a life which is as free from pain and conflict as is possible in a fallen world? Well, seek wisdom. Do you want knowledge, prudence, and discretion? Well, seek wisdom. Do you want a skill set which provides better returns than silver and gold? Seek wisdom. Do you want to please the God who created this world for you and then suffered and died so you could be with him in eternal joy? Seek wisdom. I hope you have enjoyed this podcast. We will see you again soon when we meet to discuss God's ancient truths for our modern world.